Right now, you are full. You probably don't even notice it, but you are. Somewhere in your home, there is a refrigerator humming softly, packed with more calories than an entire Ice Age tribe would see in a month. If you feel a slight rumble in your stomach, you don't panic. You walk a few steps, open a door, or tap a screen, and food arrives at your doorstep in 30 minutes. You have the luxury of being picky. You throw away leftovers because you're just not in the mood for them. Hunger for you is a minor inconvenience. It's waiting an extra hour for lunch. It's grumbling because your favorite restaurant is closed. But for nearly all of human history, hunger wasn't an inconvenience at all. Famine was the ultimate executioner, and it never broke a human body gently. It attacked from 4 brutal directions at once. The physical starvation could break your internal organs. The desperate consumption of toxic plants could poison you from the inside out. The cold social arithmetic could turn your loved ones against you, and the slow, psychological madness of starvation could erase your humanity long before your heart actually stopped beating. So, here's the real question. For hundreds of thousands of years, with no crops, no global supply chains, no modern agriculture, and no backup plan when the environment turned dead silent, how did our ancestors make it through extreme famines? Because they did. Your ancestors survived catastrophic droughts, volcanic winters, and ecological collapses that wiped entire ecosystems off the map. But the survival methods they used to pull that off are among the darkest, most harrowing choices our species has ever been forced to make. Start with the first stage of starvation, when all normal food is completely gone. Here is a biological truth that most people forget. The human body is a demanding engine. It requires a constant stream of energy just to keep your heart pumping and your brain firing. When that stream stops, your body turns on itself. It devours its own fat, then its own muscle tissue. Your organs shrink. Your skin tightens over your bones, and a deep, biological panic sets in. When traditional game vanished and plants withered, ancient humans entered a phase of desperate, indiscriminate consumption. They ate things that were never meant to be digested. Archaeologists studying ancient coprolites, fossilized human feces, have found evidence of people consuming raw tree bark, grinding the tough inner layer into a fibrous dust just to fill the agonizing void in their stomachs. They ate toxic roots, learning through lethal trial and error how to leach out poisonous compounds using ash and water, preferring slow poisoning over immediate starvation. When even the bark and roots were gone, they turned to dirt. Known as geophagy, ancient humans ate specific types of nutrient-poor clay. Clay couldn't nourish them, but it expanded in the stomach, trickling a false sense of fullness to a brain screaming for relief. They boiled old, dried animal hides, strips of leather that had been used for shelter or clothing, turning them into a foul, gelatinous slime just to trick the body into digesting pure collagen. It was a nightmare diet. But swallowing dirt and leather was only the warm-up. When the environment offered 0 calories, ancient humans had to look deeper. Which brings us to the second survival method, cracking the untouchable vault. Bones. When an animal dies in the wild, scavengers take almost everything. Hyenas, vultures, and insects strip the meat down to the bare skeleton. To a starving human group, a bare skeleton looks like an empty plate. But inside those bones lies the single most calorie-dense, protected substance in the natural world: bone marrow. Long after the flesh has rotted away, bone marrow remains preserved inside its hard casing. It is almost pure fat. But getting to it isn't easy. It requires deliberate, heavy tool use. Across archaeological sites worldwide, researchers have found fossilized animal bones and human bones that were systematically smashed open using heavy hammerstones. Ancient humans would collect old, sun-bleached skeletons, break open the thickest leg bones, and scrape out the greasy, yellow marrow inside. Marrow was the ultimate emergency reserve. A few ounces of concentrated fat could mean the difference between life and death for a mother trying to keep her child alive. And when animal bones ran out, humans turned their hammerstones toward the only bones left in the cave. This leads us to the darkest taboo in human history, and a survival method we rarely want to admit to: desperate, ritualized survival cannibalism. For a long time, historians hoped that ancient human cannibalism was purely symbolic, a strange funeral rite reserved for honored dead. But modern forensic archaeology has painted a much colder picture. At sites like Gough's Cave in England or El Cedron in Spain, archaeologists uncovered human bones dating back tens of thousands of years that bear the exact same butchery marks as wild game. The evidence is undeniable. When famine stripped the land of life, humans processed other humans like livestock, defleshing cut marks near the joints, scrape marks where muscle was peeled from the bone, skull bases crushed open to access the nutrient-dense brain tissue, long leg bones split end to end to extract the marrow. This wasn't born out of malice or cruelty. It was born out of absolute, terrifying mathematical necessity. When a winter stretched 6 weeks too long, and every animal in a 50-mile radius had vanished, the dead became the only source of protein left to keep the living alive. To survive the extreme climate collapses of the Ice Age, our ancestors sometimes had to consume the very people they had wept for just hours earlier. Now, imagine the scenario. You've eaten the hides, you've cracked the bones, and you've broken the ultimate taboo. But the famine isn't over. The dry season stretches into a second year. The snow refuses to melt. And now you face the third threat, the cold arithmetic of sacrifice. Famine forces a group to drop all empathy and calculate human life as pure calories. Who consumes the most? Who produces the least? Who gives the group the highest chance of carrying the bloodline into the next spring? This is where social triaging took over. Ancient societies were forced to make brutal decisions about who got to eat and who was left behind. The first to be sacrificed were often the elderly. In times of total collapse, old members of a tribe, knowing they were a burden on limited food stores, would voluntarily walk out into the cold or stay behind as the tribe moved on, trading their final days for the survival of their grandchildren. The second, and most heartbreaking, was targeted infanticide. If a mother was too malnourished to produce milk, bringing a newborn into a famine meant both mother and child would die. Ancient groups were forced to make the agonizing choice to abandon newborns to preserve the mother's life, knowing she was the reproductive core of the group's future. It sounds monstrous to modern ears. But in the ruthless calculus of deep time, sacrificing the weakest was the only reason the group survived at all. If everyone shared equally during an absolute famine, everyone died together. Selective survival meant the species endured, which brings us to the final, invisible threat of famine, the one that didn't destroy the body, but shattered the mind. Starvational psychosis. When the human brain is deprived of key nutrients for extended periods, its chemistry collapses. Hallucinations set in. Irritability turns into blind aggression. Apathy deepens until a person stops moving entirely, waiting silently for death. Paranoia rips through small groups. Friends begin to look like enemies, or worse, like food. Ancient humans didn't understand the neuroscience of starvation, but they felt its horror. And they answered this mental decay through story and mythology. Across nearly every ancient culture on Earth, the deepest monsters in folklore are not giant beasts or fire-breathing dragons. They are figures of insatiable, corrupting hunger. Consider the legend of the Wendigo among indigenous North American tribes, a malevolent spirit that possesses humans during harsh winters, turning them into ravenous cannibals who can never be full. The Wendigo wasn't just a scary story told around the fire. It was a psychological shield. It was a cultural warning system designed to label starvational madness as a monster, warning the group to stay disciplined and hold on to their humanity, no matter how dark the famine got. Our ancestors used culture, ritual, and myth as a final barrier to keep their minds from collapsing before their bodies did. When you step back and look at the whole picture, a shocking realization takes hold. Famine didn't just test human survival, it fundamentally engineered who we are today. The evolutionary pressure of recurring famines is the exact reason human bodies are so exceptionally good at storing fat, a trait that kept our ancestors alive, even if it causes health issues in a modern world of endless food. The threat of starvation is what pushed humans to invent early food preservation, learning to salt, smoke, ferment, and bury food deep in the earth. The absolute horror of hunger forced our ancestors to become master strategists, botanists, and survivors. Nearly every survival mechanism buried in our genetics was forged in the struggle against hunger. The harshest scarcity on Earth didn't just fail to wipe us out, it forced us to become far more adaptable than we ever would have been otherwise. So, here is the complete picture. Famine came at your ancestors with 4 weapons: physical starvation, and they answered it by eating bark, hides, and dirt. The loss of normal food, and they answered it by cracking open bone marrow and breaking the darkest taboos of survival. The collapse of resources, and they answered it with the cold, tragic arithmetic of sacrifice to keep the core of the group alive. And mental madness, which they answered by building myths and cultural warnings that kept them sane in the dark. Every single famine was an exam written in blood and agony. Survival was never guaranteed. It was scraped out of the dirt, one terrible choice at a time. And now, look at you. You open an app, slide your thumb, and complain that your food took 40 minutes to arrive. You scrape half a plate of dinner into the trash bin because you're full. You look into a packed pantry and say, "There's nothing to eat," having never once in your life felt the specific, hollow terror of watching the horizon and realizing no food is coming for months. You don't survive famine anymore. You barely even register it. And that's not because nature got any kinder. It's because 100,000 years of starving, desperate human beings swallowed dirt, cracked bones, and made the darkest sacrifices imaginable, so that you would never have to.